my shirts, why I eat at the buffet. Butter, you got your very own kind of nice. We all live inside a butter world. Oh, butter, butter. Gonna eat it by the stick tonight. Gonna eat out this world. Oh, butter. I'm about to take a bite, 'cause I want that salty cream. What I dream about all night. Butter dreaming. I'm about to take a bite, 'cause I want that salty cream. What I dream about all.
Yo,
Hey, what's up? What's up? Welcome everyone to a episode with Butterfueled. Tonight we're doing study club. Has science? Does science has it wrong? Does science has it wrong? Thermogenesis and food. We got quite the paper.
yeah, what's going on? Welcome back to another study club. As always, this is where we take some time to dive into some literature. This isn't a study paper, but it's more like a thought piece, I guess. You could call it a what is it called? Well, they say it's a review,
A
but
review
really it's
paper.
like someone's opinion. Um, but this is a widely disputed topic. Calories and nutrition. Is a calorie a calorie? Like, what's the deal there? Like, should you track? Should you not track? And so we thought this would be an interesting paper to
Yeah,
dive into.
people love talking about calories, or people love avoiding calories. Um, you know, sure, it requires work. So if there's an excuse for you to want to avoid it, well, keep looking.
Yeah, of
Uh,
course. We should mention. If you want to lose weight, people have demonstrated you can lose weight eating exclusively Twinkies. Whether that's healthy or not for your organs and your overall metabolism is a different conversation. But when it comes to just like manipulating your weight via ingestion of food, like, it's been tried and tested and demonstrably proven over and over again, even when you're eating junk. So, that's not necessarily healthy, but it works, right? So,
yes, it works. It
just
works.
to preface.
Yeah, absolutely. A quantitative approach is, pretty clear path. All right. So, should I put up the study up?
Yeah, let's just get to it. Try to keep it under an hour.
All right. Sounds good. So, here we have the review paper. A calorie is a calorie violates the second law of thermodynamics by Richard Feynman and Eugene Fine. All
Yep.
right.
Straight out of, where is it? Department of Biochemistry from the State University of New York. Cool.
Nice. Nice. All right. So the abstract. The principle of a calorie is a calorie that
You
weight.
want to try zooming in
Let me see.
just so you can get it more in the frame?
There we go. Get rid of the gray spots there. Is that good?
Yeah.
All right. The principle of a calorie is a calorie that weight changes in hypocaloric diets is independent of macronutrient composition. It's a widely held is widely held in the popular and technical literature and is frequently justified by the appeal to the laws of thermodynamics. We review here some of the aspects of thermodynamics that bear on weight loss and the effects of macronutrient composition. The focus is the so-called metabolic advantage in low carbohydrate diets, greater weight loss compared to isocaloric diets of different composition. Two laws of thermodynamics are relevant to the systems considered in nutrition, and whereas the first law is conservation of energy, the second law is dissipation law. Something negative entropy is lost, and therefore balance is not to be expected in diet interventions. Here we propose that a misunderstanding of the second law accounts for the controversy about the role of macronutrient effect on weight loss, and we review some of the aspects of elementary thermodynamics. We use data in the literature to show that thermogenesis is sufficient to predict metabolic advantage, whereas homeostasis ensures balance under many conditions. As a general principle, a calorie is a calorie violates the second law of thermodynamics. Nice. Quite the mouthful.
Yeah, this paper is going to be very technical, but I think one important assumption to highlight that this guy is making is that he's saying that hypocaloric diets, independent of micronutrient composition, should lead to the same result. But of course, that's a very simplistic take on the whole calories, like the whole like calories in, calories out, because the full model of calories out takes into consideration the thermic effect of food. So that's something that might be being overlooked here, or like might be overlooked by many people who push against this. Of course, a calorie is not a calorie. Like the source of the calories is different, but calorie is a unit of energy. But the point of this is, um, they're trying to address the metabolic advantage found in a low carbohydrate diet. So, pretty interesting stuff.
Yes, yes. Um,
All right, so start with the review. The recent awareness of an epidemic of obesity coincides with and may have contributed to a dramatic increase in the popularity of a variety of low carb diets. This rapid switch in dietary habits of a significant part of the population and the virtual revolution in the food industry is unusual in that it stands in a direct opposition of two long standing recommendations of the majority of the nutritional and medical establishment. Despite isolated examples, such a recent editorial by the Walter Willett pointing to the need to understand low carb diets, there is still little real acceptance by nutrition professionals or health organizations. One aspect of these diets that has been especially controversial is the so-called metabolic advantage. The idea that more weight may be lost calorie for calorie compared with diets of higher carb content. Um, that's all pretty interesting. It's papers from 2004, and until to this day, people will be having discussions around like this concept of metabolic advantage, right?
yeah, yeah.
So in the paper, they say they recently reviewed literature on metabolic advantage. They show that there is a sufficient number of reports in the literature to establish the existence of metabolic advantage. I'm going to skip some of the parts here. Reports we cited have frequently been met with the criticism that data could not be right because they would violate the laws of thermodynamics. So they mention an example is the recent demonstration of metabolic advantage in a small pilot study, which despite its preliminary status, was extremely well controlled. Three groups were studied: a low carb group, a low fat group, and the third group also consumed a low carb diet, but an additional 300 calories were provided. And then they break down how many calories they were eating: 1,800 for men, 1,500 for women in the low carb group, 1,800 and 1,500 in the low fat group. And then, in the low carb but additional 300 calories, they were eating 2,100 and 1,800. So what do they say? The order of average amount of weight loss was 23 pounds in the low carb group, 20 pounds in the low carb plus 300 calories group, and 17 pounds in the low fat group. This work received a good deal of attention in the popular press. Media reports, however, included comments of experts that it doesn't make sense, does it? It violates the laws of thermodynamics. No one has ever found any miraculous metabolic effects. If this is an accurate quotation, it is odd indeed. Miraculous or otherwise, a metabolic effect was found. In the absence of identifiable methodological error, experimental data has to be accepted, and numerous investigations, in fact, serve as precedents for Green et al.'s findings. That's pretty interesting. So the low carb group lost 23 pounds versus the low fat group, which lost 17 pounds.
Yeah, yeah, and what? Yeah, it's all very interesting because it's all depends on the starting points. It depends on the age, how active they were. So it would require to for us to look at have a deeper look at this study. But yeah, it is at face value. It looks pretty interesting to see the low carb group lose 23 pounds, low fat lost 17, and the low carb that ate more still lost more than the low fat group. So, it's something interesting.
Yeah, interesting. I think that some of that might be explained by loss of water weight as well, because as you know, whenever you eat carbs, especially if you've been doing like low or zero carb, you know that when you eat carbs, you feel like extra puffy, right? And that's just because of the water retention. So that
Yeah,
could be one possible explanation.
very true, very
We gotta
true.
keep an open mind here. Our bias is obvious, but we're driven by the science and the data too, right? Just because nutrition nerds don't align with our carnivorous views doesn't mean that there's not research or science out there that aligns with our views. Of course, that's the point of Study Club. Anyhow, in our previous review of metabolic advantage, we showed that there is, in fact, no theoretical violation of the laws of thermodynamics, and we provided a plausible mechanism. In general, the pathways for gluconeogenesis that are required in order to supply obligate glucose to brain and central nervous system, in combination with increased protein turnover, could account for the missing energy. Here we simplify the thermodynamic argument and review some of the relevant principles. We show, moreover, that well-established data in the traditional nutritional literature predict metabolic advantage, and no one should be surprised. The ironic conclusion is that the principle that weight gain on isocaloric diets must always be independent of macronutrient composition would violate the second law of thermodynamics.
That is quite a mouthful.
Yeah, all
Uh,
of this is.
yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, that's just kind of setting up the stage for what we're going to see ahead. Um, and basically saying that macronutrient composition is it's a will dictate, um, can possibly dictate how much weight you gain or how much weight you lose. But always you gotta always keep in consideration how the calories. All right. So, what do we mean by a calorie is a calorie? Because it is a colloquial phrase, it is important to understand exactly what is meant by a calorie is a calorie. The most common meaning of it is that it is impossible for two isocaloric diets to lead to different weight loss. Frequently, the concept is justified by reference to the laws of thermodynamics, but an explicit connection has never been spelled out. More recently, Bush, and Scholler appeared to identify a calorie is a calorie with the first law of thermodynamics. They also admit that high protein, low carbohydrate diets can lead to greater weight loss than isocaloric, low fat diets, in agreement with our assessment. Nonetheless, they maintain that a calorie is a calorie, now justifying it by the connection of the phrase to the concept of energy conservation. So basically, 100 calories is equal to 100 calories. Uh, but if you follow a low carbohydrate diet, uh, you actually lose more weight compared to a low fat diet. But still, a calorie is a calorie. So it makes sense, and I think we have to accept that a calorie is a calorie in terms of energy conservation, as they're saying over here. But then you have to factor in the second law of thermodynamics, which is what this paper is trying to do. And yeah, we'll get to that. It is important to point out that no study of isocaloric diets has ever claimed that the first law of thermodynamics is not true. Bush, and Scholler have limited themselves by only including the first law and therefore do not understand how the differential weight loss could occur and think it deserves further study. A major point here is that there is more than one law of thermodynamics and that a uh, more accurate understanding of the role of the second law shows that differential weight loss is not inconsistent with any physical principle. Thermodynamics.
Yeah. The idea that a calorie is a calorie comes from the misunderstanding of the laws of thermodynamics. There are two laws of thermodynamics: the zeroth law that establishes the concept of temperature and the third law that describes absolute zero are not relevant here. When speaking of the laws of thermodynamics, it is important to be sure that one is including the second law. The first law is very different in character from the second law. The first law is a conservation law. It says that the form of energy may change, but the total is always conserved. The second law is a dissipation law. It defines a quantity, the entropy, S, which we traditionally identify with disorder or high probability. The second law says that in any real irreversible process, the entropy must increase. Balance is not expected. Entropy is, in fact, identifiable with irreversibility. So, people unfamiliar with the second law of thermodynamics, they're going to be confused by that, but essentially it's another way of thinking about it is, things tend towards disorder.
Hmm.
You tidy up your room, but then you wait enough time, your room's like automatically by law gonna become more disorganized until you come in again and you put in the effort to clean up and organize, right? I mean, just think about it. If you leave things like by themselves, they will just they'll gather dust, they'll become dirty over time. So that's disorder, right? Another way of thinking about it is, some processes are irreversible, like when you crack an egg and you cook it. You cannot reverse that process, right?
Yeah.
Just an example, something to illustrate the second law. Anyhow, it is important to understand that it is the second law that drives chemical reactions. The first law is a bookkeeping law and tells us that the total energy attributed to work, heat, and changes in chemical composition will be constant. It does not tell us whether such a reaction will occur, or if it does, what the relative distributions of the forms of energy will be. To predict the tendency of the reaction to occur, we must employ the second law that says that entropy must increase. In a chemical reaction, at constant temperature and pressure, the entropic and energetic effects are combined into the change in the Gibbs free energy, delta G, whose sign predicts the direction of a reaction and whose magnitude indicates the maximum amount of work realizable from the reaction.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so it's just a really convoluted way of saying, things tend to disorder, and some reactions will be more spontaneous than others, right?
Yes, yes. What's interesting is that they are trying to make a distinction between the first law and second law, and saying that the first law is conservation or a bookkeeping, right? So if you're looking at a closed system, it uh, it's all about total energy. It doesn't matter what form the energy is in, you know the total energy. However, uh, when it comes to chemical reactions, you have to factor in the second law, and the second law, you know, um, uh, there are, yeah, I don't even know how to, yeah, there's just entropy. There's a chemical reaction, and there is entropy. There's loss of energy, basically, in the form of heat or whatever.
Yes, sir. So this is the really technical part of the paper.
Yeah. Applications of delta G, the Gibbs free energy. To understand the implications of calories a calorie, the energy yield could be path independent and the same for all diets. Consider that it implies that carbohydrate and protein are equivalent fuels as shown in figure 1. The diagram indicates that because it is a state variable, the free energy delta G for path 1 must equal to that for path 2 plus 3. If the delta G values for path 1 and path 2 are to be taken, the calorimeter values, they will be approximately equal. 4 kilocalories per gram, path 1, corrected for ureagenesis. This means that delta G for path 3, the conversion of protein to carbohydrate, also corrected, must be 0. There exists at least one condition where this is not true, the standard state. It is generally considered that gluconeogenesis from 1 mole of alanine requires 6 ATP. Of course, free energies are concentration dependent. So in vivo values will differ from standard state values, but they are continuous functions of the concentration, and there will be numerous conditions on which delta G is not 0. In other words, assuming that protein and carbohydrate are energetically equivalent leads to a contradiction. Um, yeah, so basically, they're referencing this diagram over here. Um, this is path 1, path 2, basically saying, hey, yeah, this is the amount of energy of metabolizing protein. This is the amount of energy of metabolizing carbohydrates. So if we metabolize protein to carbohydrates, um, you know, you can equate protein in energy to you produce the output of carbohydrate, and then you can get to the same output if you follow the carbohydrate metabolism path. Um, but obviously, that conversion process there is efficiency losses in this conversion process. If you're trying to go from protein to carb.
Yeah, as you would in like gluconeogenesis, for example.
Yeah. Yes. Uh,
So,
it, you got
anything else?
inefficiency? No, 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 no.
Yeah. So yeah, now they're going to address the inefficiency. The second law was developed in the context of the Industrial Revolution and the attempt to understand the efficiency of machines. The law describes the theoretical limits of the efficiency of engines and applies as well to living systems. The second law says that no machine is completely efficient. Some of the available energy is lost as heat, and in the internal rearrangement of chemical compounds and other changes in entropy. In other words, although the first law holds even in irreversible processes, energy is still conserved. The second law says that something is lost, something is unrecoverable. The efficiency of a machine is dependent on how the machine works, and, for a biochemical machine, the nature of the fuel and the processes enlisted by the organism. A simple example is the inefficiency of low test gasoline in high compression gasoline engines. If a calorie is a calorie were true, nobody would pay extra for high test gasoline. The calorimeter values of a gasoline will be the same whether or not it contains an anti-knock compound. In weight loss diets, of course, inefficiency is desirable and is tied to hormonal levels and enzyme activities. Yeah, inefficiency is desirable. That's a good point. If you're trying to optimize for weight loss, you do not want to be efficient. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah, you want to be losing the most amount of energy just by doing the least amount of work. So
exactly,
you just want to be walking around exuding energy.
exactly.
Okay, so efficiency and thermogenesis. In nutrition, one component of inefficiency is measured in thermogenesis, the thermic effect of feeding, or the heat generated in processing food. There is a large literature on this subject, and the general conclusion, as summarized in a recent review by Jacquier, is the thermic effects of nutrients is approximately 2 to 3% for lipids, 6 to 8% for carbohydrates, and 20 to 25% to 30% for proteins. So basically saying that when you eat fat, you lose 2 to 3% of that energy metabolizing fat. If you eat carbohydrates, you lose 6 to 8% of that energy uh, metabolizing carbohydrates. And if it's protein, it's 25 to 30% of energy loss.
Yeah,
There.
I wonder how that changes for protein if it's raw or not.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. I think just from the top of my mind, I think it would actually be higher, right? Because it's probably harder to metabolize raw proteins. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
I
that's what
think.
that's what I would think initially. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, we need to do a study on that.
yeah, yeah,
It is
man. What happens if for a whole month we eat cooked carnivore, strict carnivore, and then another month we eat strict raw meat? Same calorie equated across both months. Are we gonna lose weight?
that is true, right? You start with a DEXA scan at the beginning of the month, uh, DEXA scan at the end of the month, so that you show changes in body composition for the first 30 days, strict carnivore, and then you have your starting point for your raw carnivore, and then do your 30 days raw carnivore, another DEXA scan at the end, so you see changes in body composition.
Man, that would be so interesting. But
Yeah,
you'd have to control for like activity and sleep. So
same amount of steps, same amount of hours slept every single day, like a machine.
yeah, hey,
uh,
maybe
and
we could do it.
and same amount of food, right? Just make it really simple. Just ground beef, right? Because what 80% or 85%, whatever, but it's got to be the same. So
Yeah,
you even control for the same food.
yeah, because there would be a lot of variability if we were doing ribeyes. So
Yeah, yeah, because you can't control how much fat a ribeye a butcher's gonna trim off. right? So
Yeah. Man, we're gonna have to do this at some point.
yes, yeah, it would be
I'll do it.
interesting. In the name of science. It is interesting that this data itself might be enough to explain metabolic advantage. Here we took the average of Jequier's values 2.5, 7, and 27.5 for fat, carbohydrate, and protein, and calculated the effective energy yield for a 200 calorie diet. If we assume
2000.
a sorry,
2000.
2,000 calorie diet. If we assume a diet composition of carbohydrate, fat, protein of 55, 30, 15 within range of commonly recommended diets, the calculated effective yield is 1848. So basically, you're eating 2,000 and you follow this macronutrient distribution, you're actually, you could say, ingesting 1848 calories. We now consider the effect of reducing carbohydrates progressively and substituting the calories removed equally between fat and protein. Figure 2 shows that the wasted calories due to thermogenesis increase as carbohydrate is reduced and reach 100 calories at 21% carbohydrate. This value of 100 calories is recommended by several professionals as the goal of daily weight reduction. Notably, at 8% carbohydrates, the value for the early phase of Atkins, South Beach, or protein power diets, 140 calories are lost as heat. Now, there will be metabolic accommodations, and one can predict that the ratios will stay the same over a long term diet. But the calculations show that the possibility of metabolic advantage should not come as a prize. Um, so yeah, just by the inherent nature of taking out carbohydrates and replacing it with fat and protein, you end up eating more protein, which is why people kind of recommend protein a lot. And just by the inherent nature of increasing your protein, you are effectively burning more calories through heat just by eating. I think this is what they're trying to illustrate over here. Um, So as you increase the percentage carbohydrates here up to 60%, you are your effective yield, how much you're actually consuming, goes up using the substitution that they're saying. And yeah, the more you reduce your carbohydrates and you try to have the same amount of calories, the more you're burning off of um, just by eating. So if you technically you would be ingesting 1,700 calories if you went zero carb, which is quite the gap if you're eating 2,000, but actually uh, consuming 1,700.
Yeah, that's a 300 deficit.
That's a 300 deficit. Yeah. Um, that also means no milk though. So uh, buyer beware. Recommendations for fighting obesity frequently call for small reductions in calories. In fact, given the resistance of steady state systems to small perturbations, it is doubtful that this is a promising strategy. Nonetheless, taking the goal at face value, if it could be achieved by a simple change in macronutrient composition, such a method would seem worthy of serious consideration. The arguments above show that a phenomenon is possible. There are plausible arguments for it could take place and substantial experimental evidence for its occurrence. Yeah.
Very fascinating. And to wrap up the conclusions in plural, a review of simple thermodynamic principles shows that weight change on isocaloric diets is not expected to be independent of path, meaning metabolism of macronutrients, and indeed such a general principle would be a violation of the second law. Homeostatic mechanisms are able to ensure that a good deal of the time weight does not fluctuate much with changes in diet. This might be said to be the true miraculous metabolic effect, but it is subject to many exceptions. The idea that this is theoretically required in all cases is mistakenly based on equilibrium, reversible conditions that do not hold for living organisms, and insufficient appreciation of the second law. The second law of thermodynamics says that variation of efficiency for different metabolic pathways is to be expected. Thus, ironically, the dictum that a calorie is a calorie violates the second law of thermodynamics as a matter of principle.
um,
Nice.
yeah, that's like the sound bite, right? Um, Basically saying like if you're in a living organism, you're gonna metabolize protein differently from carbohydrates and fat. You're gonna metabolize all of these differently. So this is a sort of like the language battle that we're having, um, that you can see in the community. Um, they're saying, hey, in a living organism, a calorie, you cannot say a calorie is a calorie because, um, if you choose 100% calories from protein, uh, the effective yield is much less than 100% calories from carbohydrates. Uh, so, but if you use the first law of thermodynamics, which is like the bookkeeping in a closed system, conservation of energy, sure, it doesn't really matter. You put all the food in your plate, all that food, the amount of calories in that plate is not going to change. Um, it changes once you consume it.
Exactly. Um, the analysis above might be said to be overkill, although it is important intellectually not to invoke the laws of thermodynamics inappropriately. There are also, however, practical consequences. The seriousness of the obesity epidemic suggests that we attack it with all the means at our disposal. This is in 2004. Metabolic advantage with low carbohydrate diets is well established in the literature. It does not always occur, but the important point is that it can occur. To ignore these possibilities and to not investigate the precise conditions under which it appears would be cutting ourselves off from potential benefit. The extent to which metabolic advantage will have significant impact in treating obesity is unknown, and it is widely said in studies of low carb diets that more work needs to be done. However, if the misconception is perpetuated that there is a violation of physical laws, that work will not be done, and if done, will go unpublished due to editorial resistance. Attacking the obesity epidemic will involve giving up many old ideas that have not been productive. A calorie is a calorie might be a good place to start. Boom.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Ba- Basically saying that, hey, um, it's not helpful to say a calorie is a calorie, although I completely understand what is meant by saying a calorie is a calorie. Um, it's not helpful because people who don't understand this, they will hear something like, oh, a calorie is a calorie, so it doesn't matter if I have McDonald's or if I have steak. If I count my calories, I should be fine, which is generally true. I mean, in the study that they showed here, both people lost weights, but there could be some variability as to how much weight you could lose, and there's also muscle to take into consideration. Um, yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot, but I think they they it's I mean the saying calorie is not a calorie, like the guy is trying to be controversial on purpose, right? Like he obviously has
Yes.
a low carb bias, and I mean so do we, but also like we have to be very careful about how we address the situation. And everything he's saying on the paper makes sense, and it's important not to take him out of context either, right? As you mentioned, Jay, he is saying like a calorie is a calorie, but once you put it in your body, it's different because of the second law of thermodynamics, and there's these weird things that happen that can be explained by potentially number one, the thermic effect of protein, right? uh, Eating more protein produces more heat, and
Mhm.
other metabolic pathways like gluconeogenesis, right? um, it's also interesting to point out that uh, maybe I think he mentioned it here somewhere, but the idea, the concept of like the fact of protein turnover might increase in the body if you're having a high protein low carb diet, right? Meaning that your muscle tissues, your organs, um, does it say it here?
Oh yeah,
Turnover.
I think I got it here. Is it this line over here?
Yeah. So in general, the pathways for gluconeogenesis, in combination with increased protein turnover, could account for the missing energy, right? So the increased turnover, right? Again, remember, we're not like static uh, physical creatures. We're more like a river. There's stuff flowing in and out constantly, right? So, our muscle tissues are replacing themselves, our organs are replacing themselves, our skin is replacing itself, our nails, etc., etc. You get what I'm saying? And surprise, surprise, most of what we're made of is protein, right? Even our bones and hair and nails are made of protein. Bones are made of protein too. Most people think they're just like made of calcium, but they're made of like protein calcium complexes. Um,
Yeah.
which is why on a carnivore diet you don't really need that much high calcium because you're having enough protein, fat soluble vitamins, absorption of calcium goes up, etc., etc. Right? We don't know a lot about nutrition, but we know there's definitely something here. And when you start considering what they're saying here, you see some things line up, right? And I think it's interesting. We could dive into this deeper in the future, Jay. The other metabolic pathways, gluconeogenesis, um, protein turnover, and the thermic effect of protein, right? Because
Yeah.
I think those three mechanisms would be a good place to start in explaining what is going on and why, a food calorie is not a food calorie, right? I'm adding another level of complexity here, right? A food calorie from protein is not the same as a food calorie from carbs, but across the board, energy is energy. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, this is also that such an area where people can start picking their studies and to support their views. So you can have like a normal person or like a normal defender or a regulator that whose job is to regulate and keep the standards and keep this modern ideas intact, whatever. They may be able to choose studies where they show that doesn't matter what the macronutrient composition is, they both lost equal amount of weights, right? And those studies exist. So
yeah. Yeah, and also, like some studies will suggest, like, Lane Norton talks about this all the time, and so do like all his like BioLane crew. Like, when you do go low carb, they'll say like, oh, the DEXA scans show like lean mass was lost, but remember, like, lean mass includes water weight too.
a lot of
So
it is water weight, yes.
yeah, so there is going to be that loss as well. So now there's four things to consider, right? The water weight loss, when you're in the context of like low carb diet, is important. And
Yeah.
another thing I might add is that would be interesting. Of course, we don't know these things yet, or like we haven't come across into them. But what protein are you eating, right? Like, they say somewhere over here, they say like, we know this happens, but it doesn't always happen, but we should look into it. And I wonder, like, if the source of the protein, the dietary protein, might have an effect on it. Like, say for example, are you getting most of your dietary protein from animal foods, or even like red meat specifically? And does red meat have a particular effect versus like having lean chicken protein, right? I would
Mhm.
argue yes, because of the nutrient density um, of red meat. All the all the minerals found, and the secondary metabolites that often go overlooked: carnosine, carnitine, taurine, creatine. These things. I don't know. It might lead to an increase in protein turnover. It might lead to like an enhancing of muscle recovery, right? We know creatine and carnitine, all these things are generally touted and even supplemented for their performance benefits. So there might be something there. Um, of course, it would be very hard to demonstrate. Just some other thoughts, right? So now we have a fifth thing, like, is it red meat? Like,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah. I mean, just by having more access to these valuable nutrients like creatine, carnitine, carnosine, like you mentioned, you're just gonna feel good. You're probably just gonna be moving around more, and that just by definition, you're just expending more energy without even realizing it. Now that's a big, feeling good. You're jumping up around without even noticing it. Just naturally uh, using more energy.
yeah, yeah. This has been a very stimulating paper, and again, this was not a study, right? This was like someone expressing their opinion. They do reference some studies, but that's part of the journey we're on here in Study Club and Butterfield, right? We're trying to educate ourselves and bring you along for the journey. And in the future, this will be very valuable research because we continue to learn more and more. And I have many questions, and it's clear that we
Yeah.
don't know the whole story. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, any other thoughts, Jay?
Just saying shout out to Jason. He says, nice video, guys. Thanks for tuning in, man. Appreciate it. Hope you're enjoying some skirt steaks.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, shout out Jason, a fellow Discord member. Join our Discord group, guys. If you're watching
y-
this,
yes,
it's
yes.
free.
Yeah, it's free. It's free. And I think I think I just wanted to highlight one last thing, but I don't think it was that important. Um, I guess just like a key takeaway is that yes, it seems like macronutrient composition it's very important. Obviously, people who follow carnivore diets see it, adherence to the diet, which is actually the number one thing for weight loss. Are you able to adhere to a diet, right? I don't actually even view it as a diet. It's just like my daily way of eating because eating this way, I feel my best. I'm able to perform my best, and I'm able to achieve all my physical goals. So it actually goes even beyond weight loss for me, and the fact that it goes beyond weight loss for me, it's what makes it work. Shout out to Courtney. Thanks for tuning in.
Hey,
Yeah, and again, like you said, Anderson, uh, you know, it's definitely an interesting topic of discussion to talk about micronutrient composition and total calories consumed. Um, Obviously, low carb people are biased towards the metabolic advantage, and people who are not into the low carb community are more of for, just sticking with hey, you can get your results eating McDonald's. Um,
yeah, yeah. It's important to remember, like, some of the secotards, they're using calories to justify eating junk food, right? And that's not what it's about. I think if you combine like carnivore or even like a low carb animal based diet and calories together, both of these concepts, like you're really putting yourself, like, you have everything working in your favor if you're doing both of these concepts. And again, if your goal is to achieve weight loss, to achieve body recomposition, to effectively bulk, like, you have everything going in your favor. And the data will just help you back it up and kind of like hold yourself accountable. It's the same reason why we encourage people on a weight loss journey to consistently weigh themselves, because you'll have the data on your side. And sure, there's going to be fluctuations day to day, but you don't care about the day to day when the goal should be like 3, 6, 12 months or 5 years down the line. You want to keep the weight off, right? So what you care about is the trend, right? And
yeah,
you have so many things working in your favor. Like, we mentioned 5 potential mechanisms where like high protein diets might help you burn more calories. But other than that, other than this like sciencey stuff, like, you got to consider the psychological stuff. Your energy levels, your satiety levels, how it makes you feel, how easy it is to adhere. Obviously, animal protein is the most satiating. Some people will tell you like a boiled potato is also pretty satiating, and sure, it's a lot of volume, but it's not tasty unless you add some butter and cheese and sour cream or bacon bits to a baked potato. Um, so
yeah, yeah.
yeah, satiety and just feeling good, man, feeling good and doing your part for the planet when you're not relying on medications or like suffering from chronic conditions that, you know, my God, like the carnivore diet definitely seems like a miraculous diet for all sorts of pains and issues. So there's clearly something going on there.
Yeah. It's interesting that when you come to carnivore or low carb, it's like, oh, diet is health. It's such a novel idea, right? It's just, but it's actually not. It's novel to us because it's like we are rediscovering it now, and obviously we're gonna get the biggest pushback, right? Because where's the money in the pharmaceutical industry? The they have all the money, right? Right. We know we know farmers have been getting wiped out. You know that the farmers are being put on for more strict regulations or more whatever statutes and codes, whatever that they have to keep up with, incurring more costs, that they have to take on more debt, and if they don't make whatever crop that is subsidized, all the odds are stacked against them, and all the odds are in favor for pharmaceuticals, and the pharmaceutical industry is gonna give the biggest pushback to nutrition, which is where we're standing, uh, because nutrition, if people just fix their nutrition, the whole pharmaceutical industry is probably just going to collapse. Uh, it, and it's a bold statement, but I think we can logically deduce that.
Yeah,
So
yesterday we talked about the New York City and their food emissions commission, right? Like their pledge, and you look at some of the names involved: American Express. We have like investment bankers, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, involved in like these institutions that are helping restaurants and businesses transition towards mostly plant-based diets, which is a ridiculous concept because the world is already eating a mostly plant-based diet. So, my God. And then, of course, at the end of like that tunnel, of that rabbit hole, you find out like it's the tech billionaires funding these agendas. So you
yeah,
gotta ask yourself, right? Like, do these people have the best interests? Of course not. It's never about your health. New York City Mayor Eric Adams applauds the hospitals for keeping their patients sick. He's not applauding the patients for healing and recovering, right? He's not applauding the hospitals for healing people. He's applauding them because they're serving plant-based meals to the patients.
they're following the guidelines, so they're being good boys, good boys, good boys. You hospitals, you make money by treating sick patients, and now you have the guidelines to have more sick patients, and these sick patients are going to stay in there at the hospitals longer, and you're going to use more beds, stay more nights. Good.
Yeah, you're gonna use more plastic. Um, your what do you call it? The hospital robe, man. Is that
Oh
the right
yeah.
word?
The
Gown.
scrubs, or
Yeah, well,
gown.
the
Yeah.
scrubs too. Well, everything. What the doctor's wearing, what the patient's wearing, that's all made of plastic. What are they? What's the first thing they do when you get to the hospital? They put one of those gowns on you. They're gonna shoot you up an IV. That's like
That's
plastic
waste.
tubing, plastic bag, all the gloves and plastic materials that go into you just taking care of people, man. Like it's just ridiculous. It's extremely wasteful, and they want you to stop eating meat, but no one talks about all the single-use plastics that go into just like the healthcare system.
Single-use plastics, man.
Yeah,
Keyword.
it's
Keyword.
horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah.
But we could go on forever.
Yeah, we could go on forever. Just more meat, more meat. Fix
Yeah,
everything.
it's important to remember is we're all human. We're all meant to eat meat. Red meat is the highest quality animal food known to man, known to humankind. And don't fall for the lies.
Don't
Right?
fall for the
Trust your
lies.
intuition and eat meat. Save a vegan. So,
Beautiful, man. I love it. I love it.
yeah, I think that's a good place to end. I don't have anything else to say. How about you,
Awesome.
Jay?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. So I want to thank everyone for watching and wishing everyone a happy, healthy, and nutrient-dense era. Have a good one.
Peace.
Gonna eat it by the stick tonight. Gonna eat out this way.